This is Eric's sidekick, Tom, and you're listening to the Paperback Warrior Podcast.
All right. It's another episode of the Paperback Warrior Podcast. We're happy to be back on the air with your favorite podcast on vintage paperback books. Maybe it's the only podcast on vintage paperback books. I don't know. But again, this is paperbackwarrior.com, home of a lot of vintage reviews. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, social media, all that fun stuff. You can leave comments. And you can also email us at paperbackwarrior@yahoo.com. And Tom, you've been online lately. What's going on?
I have been. I've not been traveling much lately. I got a couple trips coming up that we'll talk about in future episodes. But I found I've been trying to collect up books by this guy, Richard Himmel, Himmel, who has a character named Johnny Maguire, I think his name is, that I think I mentioned in a previous episode. And I wanted to get the first Johnny Maguire book called I'll Find You by Richard Himmel. And I couldn't find it in any real-life flesh and blood bookstores, so I went on to eBay and found somebody who was selling a single copy of I'll Find You, which is a Fawcett Gold Medal paperback. It's got a very romancy-looking cover, and I hope the content on the inside of the book isn't too romancy and at least has some intrigue to it. Anyway, so it was a buy it now, but also they were accepting offers. So I gave, I don't even remember the number, but an insane lowball offer. It's something that nobody in their right minds would accept, and the seller accepted it right away. And so I was like, oh, wow, this is great. And so I paid for it immediately. And then I saw through the PayPal, because you get to have a little more visibility into who you're paying, it was a name that I recognized that I had purchased a book or two from before in a successful transaction. And then I also checked and saw that, this person's also a member of one of the paperback Facebook groups that I'm a member of. So I reached out to him on Facebook, and I said, hey, man, I just bought a copy of the I'll Find You book by Richard Himmel. If you're trying to unload other books that you haven't yet placed up on eBay, let me have right of first refusal. Send me a photo array of what you're selling, and I'll make you an offer. And if it works out, you can save yourself some eBay costs. And so he's like, yeah, sure. Nicest guy in the world. So we go back and forth. He sends me a giant photo array. And I ended up buying like 25 or 30 books from the guy for a pretty reasonable price. And so looking at the books right now, in addition to I'll Find You by Richard Himmel, I got a book called Trapped by Ori Hitt. Ori Hitt was a guy who wrote mostly kind of sleazy novels, but he had a real hard-boiled noir sensibility. And so a lot of them are, I would say, secretly crime novels. I got a couple books by George Harmon Cox, one called The Camera Clue, and another called The Crimson Clue. I got Death of a Dastard by Henry Kane. That's one of the Peter Chambers books. A book that I'd never heard of before, but it's got a cool cover and a neat concept called Never Kill a Cop by Lee Costigan. The Case of the $1 Billion Body by Joseph Shallett. A bunch of other books. I'm not going to bore you by just reading off everything I purchased. But then I got, looks like 6 ace doubles, including a couple books by Owen Dudley, whose real name escapes me. It's Dudley something, but he was a Western author. But he wrote some crime novels under that. One book I got was called The Deep End. A book by Lewis Trimble called The Corpse Without a Country. I've read his stuff. I like it. A book called, I'll get to that one in a second. I got a Harry Whittington book that I didn't even know existed called Play for Keeps. And it's by Harry Whittington. But what's interesting in this ace double is the book is abridged as the ace double. They cut it down for size. And I guess this was one of the few Harry Whittington books that was originally issued in hardcover. And then Ace bought the rights to it. Oh, there you go. Eric just pulled a copy right off the shelf. And so your copy is cleaner and nicer than mine. It's an abridged copy of the book. I don't know if it was abridged by Harry Whittington or if someone from Ace took a hacksaw to it. I got a book called The Quaking Widow by Robert Colby. I like him. The Corpse in the Window by Bruce Cassidy. I like him. And another one called Run If You Can by Owen Dudley. I also got an ace double here. One side is called Dead Ahead by William L. Stewart. And the other side is Mrs. Homicide by Day Keene. I know, Eric, you've been reading a lot of Day Keene lately, so I'm going to hereby bequeath this one to you to store for me in your collection. I expect to live longer than you, so I'll just inherit it back after you die, and your your widow or orphans give me your books. But you can have that one. You can read it. It looks good. I mean, it's not that I don't like Dakin. I just think you're more enthusiastic about his work. Anyway, so I want to thank the guy who sold this to me. I don't have permission to say his name, but he mentioned that he enjoys the Paperback Warrior podcast. I want to apologize to him for my lowball offer for the one book, but I think we made it square because I think we both walked away happy from the bigger transaction. And you can enjoy seeing reviews of the books you sold me on the Paperback Warrior website for months to come. Anything going on with you?
Well, you mentioned Ori Hit, so I just wanted to plug our friends at Stark House Press real quick, and also our friend James Reasoner. They're putting out Warped Desire and The Strangest Sin as a 2-in-1 by Ori Hit. It comes out in November, again through Stark House Press, and it features an introduction by James Reasoner, who calls these books a potent combination, a 1-2 punch of solid storytelling and characterization and heart. So look forward to that in November. You can probably pre-order it now, and hopefully maybe we'll even have a review for it.
Yeah, we got a couple Ori Hit reviews already up on the site, and so you should check those out. And I think in the future, we owe the universe an Ori Hit feature. He's just an interesting guy. I've read a little bit about his personal life and his family life, and I think he would be a fun guy to talk about for about 10 or 15 minutes, delving into turning the people on to what we think his greatest hits are.
Perfect. Yeah, sounds good. Well, speaking of your recent theft there with all those books that you got at a low offer, you're going to talk about A Thief.
Yeah, so we're going to do a feature on Richard Stark's Parker, and later in the episode, I'm going to do a review of a Parker book, number 5 in the series, called The Score, and Eric's going to do a review of Specialist number 1, Talent for Revenge. It was written under the name John Cutter, but the real author was a fellow by the name of John-Shirley. So let's launch right into the Parker series. In a recent episode, I said that the 3 greatest series ever written, and this is just my opinion, is the Quarry series by Max Allan Collins, the Matt Helm series by Donald Hamilton, and I would say Richard Stark's Parker is up there in those that holy trinity of series books. Richard Stark was a pseudonym of an author named Donald Westlake. And it was one of those pseudonyms where the pseudonym was actually more popular than the author himself. The Richard Stark books sold better, and were more commercially successful than any of the dozens of books that Donald Westlake wrote under his own name. And those are great books also. The only other person I know who has a career under multiple names where the pseudonym was bigger than his own name was the Ed McBain pseudonym of what's his real name? His real name's Salvatore Lombino. What name did he?
Edwin Hunter. Edwin Hunter.
I don't think it was Edwin. We should know this. Yeah, and
jeez. That's embarrassing.
Well, I think you're actually proving my point that the Ed McBain name was more familiar to us. Anyway, the series began in 1962 with a book called The Hunter. And the main character is Parker, who's one of these anti-heroes. Parker is a very emotionless, very tough thug who's also a master thief. But not like a shoplifting kind of thief. He's a heist guy. He's the guy who gets together a crew of people that he knows through the loose network of people who do heists together to put together a massive score. The series went for 16 books initially through 1974's Butcher's Moon, and then it stopped. He brings the character back more than 20 years later in 1997 for a book called Comeback, which was book number 17 in the series. And then the book continued for 24 books total. The series continued for 24 books total through 2008's Dirty Money, which was number 24 in the series. So we have a series that's really unstuck in time here, where you have half the books taking place in the 60s and 70s, and then half the books taking place and being written and released in the 90s and the 2000s. So Parker only has one name. You never find out what his first name is. He's very stoic. He's very machine-like. And he's incredibly professional. And I think that's the word I keep coming back to when I think about Parker, is that Parker is always, he's a professional in an industry which is filled with amateurs and people who would do double crosses. He's forced to endure the lack of professionalism in the folks he needs to do business with. And that ends up creating a lot of the drama. The books can really be read in any order. However, I would say that books 1 through 3 need to be read in very specific order because they comprise one long story. And those books are The Hunter, The Man with the Getaway Face, and The Outfit. I also think that the very last 3 books in the series should also be read in order because they form one long story, and that's Nobody Runs Forever, Ask the Parrot, and Dirty Money. Now, Parker's one of those characters, and Stark's one of those authors who went with this gambit that we see a lot in books from that era, where a character is being hunted by the mob or hunted by the law or hunted by somebody, and they do the very easy thing, and this must be so simple to pull off, where you just go to a plastic surgeon and you ask them to give you an entirely new face.
Yeah.
Mac Bolan did this in one of the first episodes. Drake, The Man Without a Name, or Man Without a Face, or whatever it is, the series by... Who wrote the Drake series?
Oh, that's Dan Marlowe. What's going on
tonight? Dan Marlowe. Eric's got a head injury.
Death Dealer, he was a chameleon, right?
Yeah. Now the Parker series gets to be a little formulaic. It's usually the planning of the heist, the getaway, and some kind of resolution where sometimes there's a double cross and he needs to resolve that double cross to get the money and exact revenge on the people who double crossed him. Here's some fun facts. There was a spin-off series that grew out of the Parker series starring Alan Grofield, who was an actor, a kind of summer stock actor who got into the heist game, and he had his debut in the book The Score, and he appears periodically as one of the people that Parker can call upon to work these heists with him. But Alan Grofield had a 4-book series of his own written by Donald Westlake under the name Richard Stark. Here's what's weird. Another weird little asterisk here is Grofield number 3 was called The Blackbird, and it has the exact same opening chapter as Parker number 14, Slayground, but just with the perspective change. Instead of seeing what happens in that chapter through Parker's eyes, you see it through the armored car robbery through Grofield's eyes, and then after that first chapter, they both go their own way. Donald Westlake wrote a series under his own name called the Dortmunder series, which was a very comedic version of heist novels. They made a couple movies out of them, The Hot Rock and Bank Shot. One of the books that Westlake wrote in the Dortmunder series was called Jimmy the Kid. It was actually made into a very bad 1982 movie starring Gary Coleman. The plot of the Jimmy the Kid book, though, is fascinating. Dortmunder and his heist crew, they read a Richard Stark novel called Child Heist, a novel that doesn't exist in real life, but has excerpts in Jimmy the Kid to use as a blueprint for their own kidnapping scheme in Jimmy the Kid. So it's really a hall of mirrors that Westlake is creating. There have been several movie adaptations of the Parker books. Lee Marvin starred in a movie called Point Blank, which is based on The Hunter. Mel Gibson starred in a movie called Payback, which is also based on The Hunter. And Jason Statham played Parker in a movie called Parker, which is based on the book Flashfire. Robert Duvall starred in The Outfit. All these guys are playing Parker. One of the more interesting castings was Jim Brown, who I believe is an NFL player, but he was a large African-American movie star who was played in a lot of cool action movies. He played Parker in The Split, which was also based on a book called The Seventh. A lot of these books were released under different titles for the same book, so it gets a little confusing. The Handle, for example, became Run Lethal when a reissue of the books was packaged as men's adventure novels under the Violent World of Parker moniker. The Score became Kill Town. Here's a fun one. Parker, as a character, actually had a cameo in the Joe Gores novel Dead Skip, which shares a scene with Plunder Squad, a Parker book. There have been many different pastiches of Parker where people have written books that are basically Parker books under a different name. The Nolan series by Max Allan Collins, we talked about that. There was an Australian series called the Wyatt series by an author named Gary Disher. That's just functionally Parker novels. The Joe Kurtz series by Dan Simmons implies that Dan Simmons' thief character, Joe Kurtz, might have been Parker's illegitimate son. There were graphic novels also made of the Parker books by a guy named Darwin Cook that were issued between 2009 and 2011. The Hunter, Man with the Getaway Face, The Outfit, The Seventh, The Score, and Slayground were also graphic novels. My teenage son is not much of a book reader, but he's a huge graphic novel reader, and I gave him for Christmas on the complete set of the Parker graphic novels by Darwin Clark, and he could not get enough of them. He thought they were fantastic, and from what I've seen, they're great. I think the whole Parker series is great. My personal favorites in the series are The Score, which I'll be talking about later when we do the reviews, and The Jugger. I also really like that final trilogy of Nobody Runs Forever, Ask the Parrot, and Dirty Money. You don't have to search hard or spend too much money for this series. They are actually still in print from University of Chicago Press, which at the time was a pretty odd choice for a university press to put these books out. But they made a case in their press release that these books are American classics and deserve to be treated as actual American literature as opposed to something disposable. And I couldn't agree more. A lot of the information that I use for this feature I got from the absolute best resource for all things Parker, and that's a website called violentworldofparker.us. Long before I got involved with Paperback Warrior, I used to go to that site in its previous incarnations to learn a little bit more about this series, make sure I wasn't missing anything. And it's absolutely the best reference site for anything Parker. You want to know about the graphic novels, you want to know about the movies, you want to know about anything involving Parker. violentworldofparker.us is the way to go. Anyway, so that's about it for Parker. Have you ever read one of those books?
No, because it's funny because here at Paperback Warrior, we seem to have like niches, and you're the Parker guy, you're the Corey guy, and you're the Soldier of Fortune guy, and I'm Dan Marlowe, and I'm Day Keene, and I'm the MIA hunter, and I'm Jack Higgins. So we never cross over.
There's enough Parker books out there, and I'm in a weird situation because I don't like rereading books at all. Okay, I figure I'm only going to live 70, 80 years if I'm lucky, and my eyes are going to go and my mind's going to go. And so I want to devour as much Pulp Fiction as I can between now and when I have to live in a pine box for an eternity. But the books I have in fact gone back and read are the Parker books. And so I read nearly all these books when I was a teenager and a young man in my 20s. And so the fact that I'm going back to reading them now to do these reviews has just been such a pleasure. They're also available in audiobook and in very good performances. But I would invite you, Eric, to pick a Parker book, read it, and review it. You don't need to get into the whole history. I would avoid the first three, not because they're not good, just because it kind of sucks you into another series, and that's the last thing you need in your life right now.
Well, bring me one next week.
All right, deal. Okay,
cool.
and
I'll review it.
All right, so we're going to shift gears, and you can stop listening to my voice, and Eric's going to do a review.
Alrighty. So, real fast, Evan Hunter was the name we were trying to come up with.
Oh, Jesus, yes.
So I'm going to apologize to the Hark 87th Precinct podcast. You're going to have to forgive us. I know you listen to our show, we listen to yours, and you'll have to forgive us on that. But FYI, if you like McBain and you like that series, be sure to search for their podcast as well. It's called Hark, the 87th Precinct podcast. You can follow them on Twitter. Anyway, that moves us over to my review, and I don't have a lot with this. Really, it's pretty quick. The Specialist #1, A Talent for Revenge, by John Shirley, who was writing as John Cutter. This was a series that began in 1984 with the debut novel, and it kicked off an 11-volume series for publisher Signet. John Shirley authored the whole series. He was a really busy guy in the 80s. He did a post-apocalyptic series called The Traveler, which I really enjoy. But he's mainly known for his science fiction work, and oddly for writing songs for the rock act Blue Oyster Cult. But because of that, he really tends to ignore this series. He hasn't really, for a long time he didn't acknowledge it, but I think recently he's changed his attitude, and now these books are available in digital. The central theme of the series is toughest action hero of them all, Jack Sullivan, and his quest to find his wife's murderer. Along the way, there's plenty of high-stakes adventure and a lot of different little assignments that he's working on to pad out the series. There isn't a lot of detail here in the debut. We do learn that Sullivan is a Vietnam vet. We also come to the realization in the early chapters that he's involved in the CIA, or at least he was, and he fought in Afghanistan against the Soviets. But I really like this part of the book. Sullivan has a motto that he operates by. It is, the world is kept from falling apart only by people who help other people without being told to. So I really like that. His particular specialty is a mercenary, and he fulfills the needs of those that are seeking revenge. And it's odd, Tom, he doesn't actually charge anything for his service. He pretends that he charges his clients for this mercenary specialty, but he does that so he can sort of avoid people that want to take advantage of his services.
Oh, all right.
Yeah, does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. So he's doing good deeds. He's got a CIA operative that helps him named Malta, who was actually, I guess, a former CIA operative. And he's more of like a supplier. He doesn't really fight that much. He just sort of gives supplies to Sullivan, weapons and bombs and things like that. But anyway, the debut novel has Sullivan accepting a job from this lady named Julia Penn. Her sister was killed by a terrorist named Atuwa, I think is the name, Atuwa. And he's this former African madman who now resides off the coast of France. And it's kind of funny. Penn wants Sullivan to break into Atuwa's seaside fortress, decapitate him, and bring the head to her on a platter. She's very specific about this. Seriously. But John Shirley, he really kind of jumps the shark a lot. He builds into the narrative a lot of different characters, ranging from former allies that have kind of turned criminal, aspiring madmen. He's got a young beauty and a love interest thrown in there that Sullivan does. And there's a lot of cops, but Shirley does the cop out, no pun intended, where they're just kind of in the way. Like, they're not providing enough justice. They're just in the way. They're an obstacle for Sullivan to avoid. But it's 186 pages, and gosh darn it, it's small fonts, which Tom and I hate. And he pads this thing out to what I think is an unnecessary length. I think if he could have got this down to 160 pages, it would have been a lot better. The climax was really kind of like above the glass ceiling. Like, we knew that Sullivan was going to, invade the fortress. We knew that was inevitable. But man, I counted all the pages until his boots hit the sand. It just seemed to go on and on. But there's a lot of firefights. Like I said, there's a little bit of lovemaking in there. There's a lot of ridiculous killing. A lot of over-the-top bad guys. But overall, I guess it was entertaining. I don't have anything really too bad to say about it. I would probably read another one. And an interesting part of this is the whole continued story throughout the series is that Sullivan's trying to find his wife's killer. Sort of like The Fugitive back in the day, trying to find the one-armed killer, right?
Yeah.
So that's kind of the whole thing that kind of lures readers in, is what's going to be the next peek at who his wife's killer is. And that's revealed a little bit in the first book. He gets a clue, and that's going to lead us to Manhattan, which is the second book. Also of a note, there's a 1994 film entitled The Specialist, which is based on this series. The movie stars Sylvester Stallone as Specialist Ray Quick. Obviously, the name's changed. I can't find anything from that film's plot that mirrors anything in this book, so I'm not really sure what they were going off there. But anyway, that's The Specialist #1, A Talent for Revenge by John Shirley as John Cutter.
Isn't there a weird thing about this author where he doesn't like to admit that he wrote his own series? Is that a thing?
Yeah, that's what I was alluding to earlier. He ignored this series for a long time, along with The Traveler. He just didn't recognize them as his own work.
What do you think causes that? Why would someone do that?
Maybe he was just embarrassed a little bit. I mean, back in the day, these things were, dime a dozen novels, and I guess he just didn't want to be affiliated with that. I think he's... and listeners may be able to correct me, but I think he's a pioneer of splatterpunk, which is a little bit more rebellious, or not splatterpunk, but steampunk. And I guess he just didn't want to be affiliated with these right-wing fantasy. Oh yeah, the guys that wear the white hat fighting these tyrannical dictators. But anyway,
interesting. Yeah. All right. Well, thanks. Give us the name of the book and the author one more time.
Yeah, it's The Specialist #1, A Talent for Revenge by John Shirley, writing as John Cutter. And you can get these novels pretty cheap. I think if you visit Abe Books or hop online, this review is actually in our archive section. If you want to go to paperbackwarrior.com, the desktop version, go to the right-hand side, click on The Specialist, and I believe we've got this review and maybe another one in there as well. But you can follow the link in there also to Amazon and purchase this book, and it'll throw a little bit of money towards our way so we can better improve our broadcast here. I think that's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, well said. And yeah, I think I saw that the Specialist books are also now available as ebooks on Kindle.
Yeah, I think once Shirley admitted that he wrote these and put them into his official bibliography, they became digital versions.
Good. He might as well generate some revenue for it, and that also solves the small font problem for those people who own Kindles.
Yeah, exactly. I'm not sure if he's acknowledged the Traveler series yet, which he wrote as DB Drum. I'm not sure if he's acknowledged those, but anybody who's really into rock music, I would also recommend the Blue Oyster Cult song called Harvest Moon, which he wrote, and it's sort of like a Stephen King horror story, but it's really good. It's really slow. It's really eerie. I highly recommend YouTube it.
Did he write the lyrics or the music or both?
Yeah, he wrote all the lyrics for that song, and he wrote most of the lyrics for that album.
Wow.
And it's a great song. Have you ever heard it? Harvest Moon?
I've heard of Neil Young's Harvest Moon, but I'm assuming it's a different song.
Yeah, different song altogether. It's a creepy song.
All right. Moving along, we're going to talk about The Score by Richard Stark, which was the 5th book in the Parker series. Like we said, the Richard Stark is a pseudonym for Donna Westlake, and this was the 1964 entry in the series, starring the gruff and business-like thief known only as Parker. Now, the novel was also released under the name Killtown, and the cover for the yellow Killtown book was awesome. It's a much better cover. To me, I don't really care too much what the cover looks like. It's what's on the inside that counts, just like with people. Anyway, in the book's opening scene, Parker kills a man with his bare hands while walking down a New Jersey street, which kind of sets the tone for the whole novel and really establishes Parker as a no-nonsense character. The reason he's in New Jersey is because he's going to be pitched a plan for an audacious and complex heist that's supposed to bring in $250,000. The idea is that he and a crew of other thieves will take over an entire desolate North Dakota town and steal everything. The bank vault contents, the loan company cash, the jewelry stores, the payroll for the local mining company. They're going to strip this town out of everything they own. But the problem is, to pull this off, you need a lot of good men for the job. But the guy who's pulling all this together, who brought Parker and these other people in, he's an amateur, right? And Parker doesn't like working with amateurs. And the question is, can this guy be trusted? So Parker puts together the plan on behalf of this amateur who's kind of who's come up with the idea, that's going to rely on 12 men who were working in concert together to paralyze this town and then make off with the loot. It's this fantastic cast of characters. They spend a lot of time chewing the fat with each other. This is also the first appearance of Alan Grofield, the summer stock actor that I talked about earlier, and he serves as kind of the comic relief in the novel, and the reader gets to learn a bit about his origin story. Like I said, Grofield has his own series that happens later in the chronological sequence. But The Score is pretty much structured like other Parker heist novels. It's got the recruitment of all the guys, the planning, the execution, the getaway, and then the resolution. Part 3 of the story places the reader in the narrative heads of different characters other than Parker, which is a literary trick that Westlake does throughout the series. And it's fascinating because you get to see the intricacy involved in all these moving parts. It really is a synchronized swimming effort. There's also female characters in the story, which were really well done, that kind of humanize some of the hard cases. This is a novel which has a lot of bumps in the road to make this heist work, and some curveballs. And that's what makes any heist novel great, is the idea that something's going to go wrong, and how do the heisters navigate that so they can get away with the money. I'm not going to give any of that away here, but these bumps in the road are really, really entertaining in this book. This one stands alone quite nicely, even though it's the 5th entry in the series. So I think it's a fine place to start to see if you like the Parker series. Might as well start on a high note. It's a fairly perfect series, right? So there's nothing really wrong with any Parker book. I've never read a bad one. But this one is great. The Score is probably my favorite. It was also one of the books that was adapted to the graphic novel starring Darwin Cook. It was filmed as a 1967 French movie called, I don't speak French, Mise à sac, M-I-S-E space A space S-A-C, which translates into pillaged. The movie, though, is not available on DVD and has never been available on DVD, so I guess you need a time machine and a TV in 1967 France if you ever want to see it. Anyway, that's my review of The Score by Richard Stark. A terrific novel. I really just can't recommend it enough. If I had to list my favorite novels of all times, this would definitely be in the top 10.
Excellent. I really appreciate that. That sounded really good. I'll have to check that one out. Maybe you'll bring me that one next week. I don't know.
Well, I want to bring you one that I haven't reviewed so we can actually get some productivity out of you.
Yeah, okay. All right. So next week is going to be the last episode of October. So next week we should be revisiting October's reviews and sort of picking out our favorites of the month. So be sure to make your list, Tom.
Yes, I got to get that together before next week.
All right, we had a great October, I think, so there's a lot to choose from. But anyway, I think that's about it for now. Anything else you want to add?
No, that's it. In future episodes, you can look forward to features on Matt Helm, an episode on censorship in the genre. We're going to finally talk about plantation fiction. You're going to hear reviews of books like the novel that the movie Bullet was based on, and all sorts of good stuff. So please stay tuned, review us on iTunes, and thank you so much for listening. We really appreciate everything you guys do to keep us going.
Bye-bye now.
Be cool.